To learn a foreign language requires great patience. Patience in communication with other human beings. We're living in an age where people are so easily distracted by their devices, by social media, and now by AI. They want to communicate with AI more than they want to communicate with their next door neighbor. So I'm just going to come out and say it. We need to get back to the basics. We need to get in touch with other human beings again and start to repair all these crazy rifts in our society that happen because we're not putting in the time to understand people in our communities that we should be sharing our lives with. There's a saying like a quote that I read the other day, which I really liked, that said, "Practice to speak in such a way that other people want to listen to you or like to listen to you." And practice listening. Practice to be a good listener. Practice to listen such that other people want to speak to you. This is the art of communication. We got to work on this. But it's more than mere tricks in terms of captivating other people's attention. Sometimes I think you just have to practice to be patient with other people. And I want to give you 2 examples of people from my life who really inspired me in terms of the way they communicate. The first is an older man named Zhang Yingfu. He was a security guard near where I used to live. And he just loved to chat with me. Of course, he spoke no English, and my Chinese wasn't that good. Even now, it's not that good. This was many years ago, but then it was certainly worse than it is today. But he always used to give me the time of day. Isn't it so tricky as a language learner to find somebody who's willing to give you the time of day and willing to be patient with you? I feel like sometimes when I'm trying to speak my best, there are just some days, some situations where people, they do give me just a few seconds, and if I start to trip up, they're already, turning away to talk to somebody else or deal with somebody else or check their phone, and then the conversation gets even worse from there. But Zhang Yingfu was a man who really, he was just so in touch with life. He was such a real human being. He really had respect for people of all ages, of all backgrounds. And we used to sit down and have some chats that were pretty good, despite the fact that he spoke no English and my Chinese was quite limited. I just found him to be so expressive with his body language and also just so patient and, so giving with his time. And I asked him once about it. I said, "How is it that you're such a great communicator? I feel like we can understand each other really well." And he said, "Well, my son is deaf, and so I had to learn sign language." And he might have been using some signs in our conversations that maybe I didn't even recognize as signs because I don't know the sign. I mean, I learned sign language a little bit when I was in high school. I learned American Sign Language. I'm guessing China has its own form of sign language. But anyway, he had learned to be so expressive with his body language because his son was deaf. So he really knew and tuned into what it meant to use the hands and use the body to relate to other people. So that is something that I never forgot. I think it played in big to how he became such a great communicator. But I remember people too, all around that area where he lived, were people who were pretty patient and loved to socialize. Maybe it was because it was a bit of a more rural area. People could spare the time, when they came to town to sell their produce or whatever. There was a lot of farms around there. I had a good time chatting with people there. So he was one, and the other is a lady who I still associate now with from time to time. She's in a nearby town. She runs a tea shop. So of course, to be a tea shop boss in China, you have to be a great socializer because the way they do it is people come in, they sit down, and they chat and try different types of tea. And if they're regular customers, they might not even buy things when they come in. They just come in to sort of refresh themselves and socialize and then leave. But it's understood that when they buy tea, they'll buy tea from that shop. So this is a way that people love to socialize in China, especially South China, especially places where tea is big in the culture in China. And so I noticed that she is such a great socializer, and all of her family members and her children too, because they're used to socializing with people. And she doesn't, she gets on her children when they play on the phone too much and don't talk to the people who are in the shop. So her daughter is probably about 14, but she's become so good with language and so good at conversation, and she's not so easily distracted by phones. So I really love that about their family, and I think it's really amazing. On top of that, this woman moved to this province that I'm in and learned the language here, and she speaks it pretty well. She's just self-taught. She basically just picked it up. I really admire that in Chinese people when I meet them, because I moved to this province, Guangdong province too. I have not picked up the language of Cantonese like some of them have. Some of them moved to Guangdong for work, and essentially over a decade's time, or maybe less, basically became fluent in Cantonese. So imagine being a young adult moving to another place and picking up the language. Cantonese doesn't really have a lot of great resources. It's people, a lot of people in China pick up the spoken language just from their work and from socializing. So that's the second person who comes to mind. But what I want to impress upon you guys today is that if you want to learn a foreign language well, or even if you want to learn a native language well, you're probably going to have to cut out the distractions and get rid of that phone. The phone's coming between people. The phone's coming between you and people that you could be having really great conversations with. I don't even want to say I don't want to make it seem like you're using the other person to practice your language skills with. Think about just getting back to having great conversations with people, and then watch your language abilities take off. It doesn't matter if it's your native language or your foreign languages, they all can be in the mix. Just get back to having great conversations that are uninterrupted, free of distraction, and that's going to be really beneficial for your language learning skills, for your mind, and just for your health, your community, your friendships. Language learning is a very human sport, and it also is just, it requires patience. Patience is a virtue. Let's get back to practicing it. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I'll see you back here next time. Bye-bye for now.